All right, welcome everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order so we have plenty of time. So thank you so much for being here. This is an exciting day to have our U.S. Senate candidates with us. So we'll invite them. I know they're probably not going to be able to eat much, but we'll give you a few minutes to eat if you'd like to. So welcome. Well, we want to recognize any elected officials that are here. I know I saw Mayor Nana Billings from Hurricane. Thank you. And we have our city councilwoman from St. George, Michelle Tanner, and also city councilwoman from Santa Clara, Janine. I'm not sure where you ended up. Welcome, thank you. Let's see, did we have anyone else slip in that I missed? I'm not sure. If they do, then we appreciate them. A couple of quick announcements. We have Lincoln Day coming up really quick, February 10th. So if you haven't had a chance and you want to sit at our Republican women tables, we'd love to have you check in with LaStar and Sandy out there after and get your seat at our tables. If you're new and you're not familiar, we have Buck Sexton coming to speak at that, so it's a really fun night, a good fundraiser for our county parties. So, and then also, let's see, you've got the little volunteer hours on your table. So if you've been volunteering for a campaign or as you're getting ready for caucus, all of those hours, service hours count and they help our club. So be sure to write those down and leave them for us after, as well as there's note cards there. That's where you're going to write your question for these great candidates. So be sure to write those down. This way we get through a lot of questions. So write those down and then you can hand them to one of us and we'll facilitate that in a little bit. Let's see, what else did I miss? I think caucus is coming up March 5th, so be sure to do that. And I also have a flag initiative packet here. If anyone wants to sign that, we'll pass that around. They gave that to me. All right, so we are going to start with a prayer by our wonderful chaplain, Sharon Simmons, and she's also going to lead us in the pledge. And then following Sharon, we will turn the time over to Alexis to introduce our program. So Sharon, we'll go to you.
Let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, we're thankful to Thee for the opportunity to be together today and thankful for the sustenance Thou provides us through Carrie and her staff. We're grateful to Thee for a successful and informative January meeting with guest speaker, Rabbi Helene. We're thankful to Thee to welcome 5 U.S. Senate candidates, with 2 here on video, to share their positions with us and to answer our questions. We welcome Brent Hatch, Brian Jenkins, Carol Pippin, Trent Staggs, and Brad Wilson. We're glad they're here. We're thankful to Thee for our state senators who are in session, working diligently and long hours on our behalf. We're grateful to Thee for all those Utahns who worked tirelessly on the state flag initiative and for all the Utahns who signed it. We're grateful to Thee for giving us the 2 presidents we celebrate this month, President Washington and President Lincoln, whom Thou created, for the birth of and the reunion of this great country in its early years. We're grateful to Thee for the polls showing citizens continuing and increasing dissatisfaction with the current administration. Father, we ask Thy blessing for Carrie and her staff. May they know our appreciation for their service. We ask Thy blessing for each of our candidate guest speakers. May their experience today and in the race be enjoyable and positive for them and informative for those they hope to represent. We ask Thy blessing for our state legislatures. May they be united in passing legislation favorable to Utahns. We ask Thy blessing for all those who worked for and those who signed the state flag initiative. May we soon receive the results we desire. Lastly, Father, we ask Thy blessing for our military members in the Middle East who sustained attacks, and for the loved ones of the 2 deceased Navy SEALs, and for the loved ones of the 3 soldiers killed and the more than 40 injured in the Jordan attack. And Thy blessing for our friend and ally Israel as they continue to fight against evil. Father, we humbly ask these blessings in the name of thy beloved Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes, so according to the poll,
Go ahead and take out the screen while I'm up here. Okay, welcome everyone. First thing I want to point out is there are note cards on all of your tables, and there's a very good reason for that. We want to know the questions that you have for your U.S. Senate candidate up here. So please, write your questions on those note cards. Haley and I will be making the rounds to pick them up so that we can ask your questions. Okay, I think we're going to begin, well, some of you are just getting your food for just a minute. We're going to begin with a video, and then we're going to turn the time over to Adrielle for about 5 minutes. She is here representing Congressman Curtis today, and we have an issue with the video, so we're going to let Adrielle kind of introduce Congressman Curtis. He could not be here today because he is in DC voting in our behalf, serving Utah. So we'll go to that point, and then I'm going to go ahead and give you the rules for our forum.
If anyone wants to be my technology tech, you can be on this.
All right.
Maybe we'll have Adrielle go first.
Adrielle, you want to go first? Did she hear you? Adrielle Herring, do you want to go first? We're having trouble with the video.
Thank you for being here, everyone. I'm Adrielle Herring, and I'm here representing Congressman John Curtis today. It is my pleasure to introduce him to you. I know many of you have not met him yet. He represents the eastern side of our state, and he has been representing that part of our state for 6 years. I will tell you that in the 6 years that he has been in Congress, he has done a remarkable job for Utah. He was recently ranked in the top 10 most effective Republicans in all of Congress. In addition, his congressional office was recently ranked #1 for accessibility and accountability constituent outreach. I promise you that when he is your US Senator, you will never have had representation like him. He listens and he learns and then he leads and he delivers for Utah. He has done that over and over and over again for 6 years. He has passed bills on behalf of the state of Utah that have been impossible or considered impossible to pass. Right after Bears Ears happened, the Emory County Commissioners came to him and they were concerned they were going to be the next Bears Ears. They asked for help. For 30 years, no one had been able to help him. In his first year, he passed through the House and the Senate and signed into law by the President a 1.5 million acre lands package that saved Emory County from the Antiquities Act, from being the next Bears Ears. Not only that, but this bill that should never have been able to pass, passed almost unanimously, 97% of the vote in the House. That is the kind of representation that we get with John Curtis. When I was first considering joining his team, running his campaign, I did a 360-degree check on him because, of course, my reputation will be on the line too. The thing that I learned about him, his business partners told me that when he came in, he saved their business. He said, we had all these chiefs pulling all these different directions. And John came in and saved our company. He got everyone pulling the same direction. And that is exactly what he is doing in Congress. One of the most remarkable things, one of the most exciting things happening in Congress, in my view, is the work that he is doing at the intersection of energy policy and climate policy. Climate policy in this country is contributing massively to our debt. It is undermining our national security. It is undermining our economy, killing American jobs. Congressman Curtis has bravely taken this on and is doing remarkable work in this area. So he started something called the Conservative Climate Caucus, which I will tell you, our entire team was like, that's a very bad idea. That's bad branding. But he said, no, we have to call it climate in order to get a seat at the table. The climate community is rolling out the red carpet for him. And because of that, he goes to international climate summits and he says things like, why are you trying to ban US natural gas around the world when we produce it 40% cleaner than Russia? If you actually care about our carbon footprint, what should happen is we put US natural gas production and exports on steroids, send it around the world, replace Russian natural gas with US natural gas. That one policy solution alone would reduce more carbon emissions than the whole Green New Deal, all provisions combined, and it would put our economy on steroids. It would increase national security. It would make us not just energy independent, but energy dominant. And this is just the beginning. This Conservative Climate Caucus, that our whole team thought nobody would join. Like, we were like, if 6 Republicans join this thing, we're gonna do victory laps, John, and call it a win. It is the second largest caucus in Congress. John Curtis is providing the Republican Party with an agenda to push back on extreme climate policy. In addition, he is amazing on foreign affairs. On China, he has given the Republican Party an agenda on that as well. He's been so good on that topic that for years now in security briefings, he's been advised that he can never go to China again. There's a warrant out for his arrest in Hong Kong. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I have 15 seconds left. So I just want to say thank you very much for tolerating me. I know you'd much rather hear from the congressman. I'm sorry he can't be here today. This is a voting day in Washington, D.C., otherwise he would be here. If any questions arise for you about Congressman Curtis during this debate, I would love to answer them. I'd love to answer your hardest questions. We understand that to earn your vote, we need to answer the hard questions and the most skeptical and the most hostile. And I am here to answer any question you may have. Thank you so much.
Squeeze you in, we'll use the double booster, not by yourself up there. You're supposed to have a few on each side.
Randall, running for U.S. Senate. This is my wife, Brianna, and we have 6 kids. Welcome to our home. It still looks like Christmas around here, doesn't it? I guess it's the busyness of running Senate campaign, raising the 6 little ones who haven't got taken care of. I kind of like it because it reminds me of our campaign. We believe in faith, family, and fiscal discipline, and we got this tree on a really good sale. And it represents a lot of our faith. If you look at some of the ornaments and some of the different messages on the tree. And to be honest with you, that for me is very important for the population in this country right now, is to really focus on their faith. We have a lot of people who want to say, there's not a place for you to be voting your religious values in the public sphere, or you're trying to force your religion on other people, or you're taking away people's agency when you vote for values that are supported by your faith. And I say the opposite. I would love to see the dozens of religions and all the adherents to those religions in our countries to live their religion, and to then take those values from their faith into the public sphere. Because the public sphere needs that faith so much. It needs the miracles that come from faith. If anybody's watching right now in Congress, they're saying the same things. It would take a miracle to get people to come together. And it would in many ways. But I believe in miracles if we keep our faith in the public sphere. We are one nation under God, and always have been. And even now, all the constitutions in this country include some reference to God. And that is a noteworthy difference between our nation and our states and other places throughout the world. And I feel that we need a senator who is very set in understanding that concept, that God needs to be in the public sphere in our country. And I commit to you that I will not shelf my faith or the faith of the constituents of this country, but it will be taken into perspective with all the policies that I support. All of my votes will be centered around the families, the faith, the families of our people in a way that will uplift and help support that fundamental unit of our society and our families is phasing up. In addition to that, I'm a CPA. I work as an audit manager for the Trust Fund Administration, and I live with a balanced budget. And my wife lives with a balanced budget, and we've got to have that. It's one of those core values right now that has been forsaken so many times in the last 50 years in this country. It's been forsaken so many times in the last 50 years. But we have to have a balanced budget. We've got to have it. Number 2. Anyway, we have to get our budget in place. We have to be balanced. We can't pay for immigration reform. We can't pay for Social Security. We can't pay for Medicare and Medicaid. We're not going to be able to make the changes we need to make if we cease to operate as a going concern, if we declare bankruptcy, if we don't stop living beyond our means. We can't spend $7 trillion a year and bring in $5 trillion in revenue. We have people in the base who have voted to do just that, who have increased debt ceilings, or who have voted for continued resolution. And I would say, we simply can't afford to continue spending more than we bring in every single year. To do that, we need to change some things. We can't pay our federal employees during furloughs. And after 2019, it's frivolous, so it has caused a lot of infighting in the Republican Party. We have to say the shutdown isn't the worst thing. In order to do that, the government has to be better off. The country has to be better off financially, at least, during shutdowns than they are without shutdowns. That will open us a door for us to start effecting mass layoffs or mass relocations, not because federal employees are a bad workforce, but because we don't have money right now. We need to reallocate them to the private sector. Every company I've worked for has done something like this at some point. They have to refocus on their core assets and their core functions, and our government needs to do the same thing. If it's not explicitly stated in the Constitution, then the federal government needs to either eliminate, privatize, or send back to the states those programs. And we need to do it now. We need to do it quickly and in large ways. Not just incremental changes. If we don't have something with surgery performed, we're going to bleed to death financially, and in other ways, we'll start to find that other programs suffer. I don't have any more time to go into the details, but thank you for giving us a few minutes to let you get to know us a little bit. If you'd like to talk to Amazon.com, we'd love to hear your ideas. We'd love to be there right now for 50. We love being out amongst people. We just have various competing priorities that week. But thank you. Anything else, Greta?
Yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity to participate in our life.
Yes, we do. Have a great night.
Okay, so we did give the invitation to all the candidates, and we appreciate the ones who are here with us today. We want to also allow them to introduce themselves to you. So they will each have about 3 minutes to do so. Sharon is going to be our timer, so that she'll be watching the clock right here in the front. So you'll look for Sharon on your 3 minutes. After that, like I said, Haley and I are going to be taking cards from the tables. We will be asking questions. I think 1 minute is probably okay for the response on most of them. If it's a more complicated question, we'll just allow for a couple of minutes. But that's the plan, and we'll just alternate who gets to start each question. Do you have the other mic? Okay.
Well, hello, I'm Trent Staggs. I'm grateful for the invitation to be here. Thank you very much to the Washington County Republican Women for putting this on. A little bit about me. I'm a lifelong Utahn. I attended elementary school in Orem. And then my family moved up. My high school years I spent in South Jordan. Bingham High School, went to the University of Utah for my undergraduate degree in political science and economics, and then went to BYU for my MBA. I've operated several businesses, helped take a company public. We got listed on NASDAQ back in 22 in the energy space. And for the last 10 years, I've been able to serve my community. My wife and I have 2 children. We've been blessed with 2 great children. And 10 years in Riverton City, 7 years as its mayor. And in that time, I think I've taken that business owner's approach, that innovative approach to municipal government. And we saved tens of millions of dollars, cut taxes for our residents, and continually improve services. Now, I entered this race back in May of last year. And I did so because I said enough is enough. I really believe that the problems that we face today are 34 trillion in debt, this open border, regulatory state run amok. We have all of these issues going on because we have politicians that we elect that care more about ingratiating themselves in Washington, D.C. and its culture than representing all of us. And so my wife and I took a look at this and said, enough is enough. We're going to go ahead and run. We went ahead and did that. We're the only one in this race that agreed to challenge Mitt Romney. And we said, we produced a video. My launch video is still at trentstaggs.com. You can see it's been viewed over 1 million times. An op-ed that explained the reasons why we went out on the road. Romney was about 50% favorability, went down to 30%, said now he's no longer in the race. That is the biggest thing with that. Go to trentstaggs.com. There's a page called Proven Fighter. It talks about these things. Said no to mask mandates and vaccine mandates as a mayor. Well, the freedom of the state. Took on MG, offered a resolution supporting human life back in 2019 with my city council. Fought high-density housing and the imposition of our state legislature on so many fronts. And I have always stood up and fought against the establishment. That's what I think you as the voters have. That's the decision that you need to make. Who amongst these candidates has that demonstrated record? I do. I'll go back to DC and fight for you every single day as I've done the Riverton residents for the last 10 years.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brad Wilson, and it is terrific to be with you today. I want to thank the Washington County Republican women for putting this together. I also want to thank Washington County. You are not just the corner of our state, but in so many ways, you are the cornerstone of conservatism in Utah. This is solidly Republican land down here. You've made your voice heard in so many ways, and in this election, to determine who's going to represent Utah in the U.S. Senate, you're going to have a lot to say and a lot of influence in that. And I know that you know what I believe, which is that we need a conservative fighter back in Washington, D.C. to represent Utah in the right way. Let me just tell you a little bit about me. So I have lived in Utah my whole life, raised my family here. And our 3 adult children are launching in life, and my wife Jane and I have been married 30 years. I spent about a decade helping people plan their finances, but really for the last 25 years, I've been what I think is a cornerstone of the American economy, a small business owner, creating hundreds of jobs for Utah families. And that's been really meaningful. But in addition to that, I've had the opportunity to be in public service, including being Speaker of the Utah House of Representatives the last 5 years, where we were able to deliver some of the most remarkable conservative victories for Utah to keep this a conservative ruby red state, which we all know and love. This election about who's going to represent you in the U.S. Senate matters. There needs to be someone in Washington that actually understands the issues of this state. For example, 90% of the land in Washington County is owned by the federal government. Someone that's going to go back to Washington and fight to make sure that that's in the hands of local government and control there. Someone that understands that Washington County and the future of this community is dependent on water, and will solve that problem so you and your kids and your grandkids can live in Washington County. And someone that's going to represent the conservative values that you care so much about. I am that person. I think we've got this chance to elect someone to go back, fire Joe Biden. That's right. And work with President Trump to get our country back on track and to get things in the right place so that we know that we have a secure border, that taxes are cut, and that our economy can get back to the place that we all know it should and can be. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited to hear your questions today and see what we can learn from each other. Thank you.
My name is Brent Ornhatch, and I'm very grateful to be here today and thank the Washington County Republican women for putting this on. I have a kind of a checkered history with St. George because my life was almost ended here. You'll recall that the old airport was up on the bluff. At 14 years old, we came in on a small plane and we crashed. And I'd been sitting in the back. There was a young man counting. There were 6 seats in this plane. There was a young man showed up with a cast on and wasn't supposed to be there. So they sat me, this is pre-OSHA, all kinds of regulations. I sat back on that luggage rack and we hit and I went flying. And so I'm lucky to be here today. That plane the tail was up like this. And every time I drove into the city this morning and I was like, oh my goodness, I hope this is not as bad as that. In 3 minutes, there's not a lot we can do here. I'm really looking forward to your questions because that's what matters. But I want you to have some sense of who I am. I really enjoyed each one of the candidates here. I think you have the most conservative group here. Others who have not appeared really aren't. And I think this Senate seat is important and we deserve a true conservative to be in that. Now, to give you some idea who I am and what I feel that I bring to this race, I started out, I'm a lawyer, don't hiss, please. But I started out my career, I was a clerk for Robert Bork, whose biggest sin was he was conservative, and I kept him off the Supreme Court for that. And he told me, he said, look, you're a smart guy, you're gonna make a lot of money, but you really this is the time. Ronald Reagan is the president, this is a chance for you to actually go do something and make a difference. And so I went into the Reagan administration in the Department of Justice, and I can talk to you for hours about the kind of things we did. But we were there in the trenches and we were fighting. I was Associate White House counsel to George Bush. It was the only conservative office in the White House, and we kept a lot of things from happening. I've done a lot of things, but I got out of Washington because I wanted to raise my family here. I didn't want to be a Washington politician, but I'm getting into this race because I'm at a point in my career where I can make that change, and I do want to make that change, and I don't want us to waste this seat. I'll answer more questions about that as we go on, but you'll find that the things I've done throughout my career, and even in my law practice, have been to promote conservative values and to know how to get it done. I've been there, I've been in Washington, I've been in the rat's nest, and it is that. And I know how to do that. And I think the biggest thing with, 15 seconds, so luckily I survived that plane wreck. After this lunch, maybe you'll wish it hadn't, but I don't know. But I'm really grateful to hear it because I spent a lot of time in Southern Utah, and being here is very refreshing. Thank you.
I'll briefly introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. I like to say I'm the funnest candidate. None of my 5 boys would agree with me on that. They're mostly grown and gone. Carolyn Fippen is my name, of course. I'm running for this U.S. Senate seat. I'll tell you a little bit about me really briefly, and then I'll talk about a few things that I've done. So my family is from Utah. My parents actually packed up a car and drove across the country, never having been to New York before in their life, for my dad to complete his education, and I was born and raised in New York. The town where I live, Draper, was founded by my 3rd great-grandfather, who was born in the same area of New York where I was. I've been here 35 years. It gives me a very unique perspective. I think I like to say I was born a Mormon in New York. I was raised a Mormon in New York. You think I don't understand how these games are played and how difficult it can sometimes be to be consistent with truth, but to stand for truth. We are at a period in our history where we have no choice but to stand for truth or see it end. And I think that we in this room understand also what the United States of America is, what it means in the world. I say to my kids all the time, if you do not understand this, the way we live is not the natural state of man, then you've lived in a whole bunch, too much luxury in your life. This is not the natural state of man. It is built and it is earned. And I think every one of us understands that it must be preserved or we don't get it back. I left, like I said, I came here 35 years ago. I left just for a brief period to serve a mission for my church. My companion and I were the first sisters into Czechoslovakia after the wall came down. We saw the devastation that exists in a society. It is economic, but it is not just economic. It is social. The entire social fabric is ripped up. The spiritual life of the people is completely destroyed by the overarching power of government. Our Constitution was put in place to protect us from that one thing, the power of government. That's all it is. It is a beautiful document. Its principles are divine. I know I'm getting close and I'm really bad at time limits, so I'm just going to give you my, I spent time working, a number of years working for Senator Mike Lee and Greg Hughes, who was the Speaker of the House. I have been involved on policy, and this is after being home for 20 years raising my boys. I've been involved in policy at the state level, the federal level, always strong constitutional conservative policy. I'll probably have opportunities to talk to you about some of the details of those things. I hope to, and please reach out with any questions. Thank you.
We'll just go down the line there. So, first question, we're going to give you 2 minutes. Give us your top 2 priorities if you were elected, what you would address first.
top two priorities when I'm back in the US Senate. $34 trillion. That is the amount of debt that the current leaders in Washington, DC have left for us and the next generation and the next generation to pay back. I don't think any of us can believe the reckless and the irresponsible spending that's happening in Washington, DC. It's hard to fathom. We've got to have some leaders that are gonna go back to Washington. Do we have 1 minute or 2 minutes? 2 minutes?
Okay, I'll start over.
That's okay. Well, I won't start over, but.
No, I'll start over. Keep going.
I don't even know where I was now, so, but needless to say, there's nothing fundamentally more important to the underpinnings of this country than getting our financial house in order. And in Utah, we understand how that works. While I was Speaker of the House, one of the things I'm most proud of is we didn't cut your income taxes once, we didn't cut them twice, we cut them 3 times. You've experienced in the last 4 years the biggest income tax cuts in the history of the state of Utah. And that was done simply because we were able to constrain spending at the state level. It constrains growth in government, and it gives you money in your pockets so you can choose how to spend that money the way you want. And I'm sure I'm about out of time, but I will just say this. We have to close the border. Joe Biden, for all intents and purposes, opened the border when he became president. We've got 8 to 10 million people living here that have not come here legally. The border has to be closed. We've got to deal with this crisis, and we've got to deal with it now. Thank you.
We do the same question? Or, yes? Okay. Well, Brad took all the great issues, so I totally agree with that. Let me add to the border, because that is a huge concern, and it's gotten completely out of control. It's been reported in the last week or so that in some places like New York and I think Chicago, they're starting to displace students in schools and send them home to bring in undocumented aliens. What common sense does that make? Zero. And one of the things that we don't have reported, because liberals tend to get mixed up in their policies. Their priorities, they kind of change from day to day, and it mixes up and they can start doing bad things. I want to ask you about something. You've heard about the homeless problem. Has it been resolved? Can you tell me what the difference is between the homeless and undocumented aliens?
Legality.
There are citizens, and a lot of them are veterans who are mentally ill, and now we're not taking seriously that problem. We're bringing in undocumented aliens and kicking children out of school. There's got to be some sanity brought to this system, and there is no bigger issue that shows how crazy it's gotten in Washington than that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we all realize what's going on at the border. I was down there last year with a number of state legislators and others, and I'll tell you, it was nuts then. I talked to a man yesterday who has in Texas a big ranch. He told me that there was an 18-wheeler that pulled up on the freeway next to his ranch, opened the back doors, and hundreds of illegal aliens flooded out all over his ranch. And he said they were being chased on 4-wheelers by law enforcement, federal law enforcement, and local law enforcement. This was in Texas. Well, oh yes, yeah. And he said that they were chasing them down, not to turn them around, but to put them in vans where they were given food and water and a gift card and taken to Walmart to buy their supplies. So that is absolutely where we are. And I love what Brent said. If you look at the back of my card, it's just common sense. We literally are at this place in our country and in many ways in our world where common sense is all we need to fix some of our most fundamental problems. And I say all the time, government, the more government does those things that are not their fundamental duty, the more they fail at those things that are. We are doing all kinds of things that the federal government, hey, thanks for that, that the federal government was never constitutionally charged with doing, and it's completely unconstitutional in many cases, and yet they are failing at the very most basic things of securing our border, protecting us internally and externally. I'll tell you, I have boys who will probably be drafted, and we are about to enter into World War III. And we have very few people in Washington willing to stand up and say, no, you will not kill our children for your priorities and those things that enrich and help you and your friends and do nothing to serve the American people. We need leaders who understand these concepts and are not afraid to stand for them because they are not looking for their next job in politics. Thank you.
That's an excellent question and something I've answered for 8 months now being on the campaign trail. If you go to trendstacks.com, I say the 3 things I will champion every day as your senator is a smaller government, safer families, and a stronger economy. And I have policy prescriptions tied to each one of those at my site. If I had to choose just 2, smaller government, it is the budget. I say it is the height of immorality to have placed $34 trillion in debt on my 14-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter and on all successive generations. Immoral. How do we get there? Balanced budget amendment, I support. I signed a contract with Utah with 7 points, that's one of them. 12 appropriations subcommittees. We need to have each one of them producing a budget with ample opportunity for debate and amendment. And putting that out, no more CRs, no more omnibus spending bills. Forget it. We have to get regulatory reform that's part of smaller government. The REINS Act, R-E-I-N-S, rein in federal government. That all the regulation out there is a $4 trillion drag on our economy. Those business owners out there, it's cost $10,000 to $20,000 on average per employee or per employee to come into compliance with all this nonsense. And that is something that I've got some experience with that we'll be able to take to. I understand it being in local office for 10 years. I'm going to balance my budget. I've been on the front lines, they say, of fighting federal, state, and county overreach. With respect to the immigration issue, this is a huge issue. Something I called to light back in October. Sadly, our state had been designated by ICE as a sanctuary state back in May last year. We have way too many policies that attract illegal immigrants, like driver's licenses, in-state tuition. We've gutted the E-Verify provision just the other year. It used to be 15 employees, they took it up to 150. Folks, there are things we can do in our own state. Instead, when I called that out, state leaders said, we can't be the backstop to a failed federal immigration policy. I thought that's horrible. Texas, on the other hand, Ken Paxton, Governor Abbott, is doing just that. They are standing up and being the backstop to a failed federal immigration policy.
This next one will start with Brent. Okay, a lot of you touched on this already, but I want to know just really quick, 1 minute, what's one way you would help address the border crisis?
The which crisis?
The border crisis.
The border crisis.
Your mic is not working.
Mine is not working.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's somewhat simple. You shut the door. I mean, really, this isn't that difficult. You saw and Senator Romney came out and was criticizing the Republicans for not doing something about this bill that they had. And there's been a lot of debate. They haven't released it, but they're talking about maybe the compromise is letting out in 5,000 people a day. I mean, add that up. It's 1.8 million. We've had 8 million in the last 3 years under Bush. Under Biden. This is not an answer. You got to shut the door. And the really irritating thing about it is Biden's acting like he has to have something happen. He has the authority right now, and he doesn't exercise it. He's not fulfilling his constitutional duties and imperative. That wasn't the way it was when I was working in the White House as Associate White House Counsel. We applied conservative principles and we followed the Constitution, and that's what he needs to do. And the Senate, certainly the Republicans in the Senate and the Republicans in the House need to hold him to it.
Absolutely. When it comes to the border crisis, we need to shut down funding until Congress needs to shut down funding until the president does what he has the power currently to do. My understanding, in talking with someone in Washington earlier this week, is that Biden would, with this bill that is hopefully falling apart, Biden would be given more authority. I don't think we have a president who needs any more authority. And we do not need to codify the authorization of more illegal immigration. Why are we codifying illegal immigration, period? Right now, thank you. Right now, the president has the ability and is supposed to be, the executive branch is supposed to be holding every single asylum seeker until the adjudication of their case. These cases are 7 to 8 years out right now. Meanwhile, they create homes and families and have children in the meantime. We literally have a massive crisis on our hands. It can be stopped by stopping the flow of money.
Well, sadly, yes, you have Mitt Romney out there blaming President Trump for some reason that the border situation is where it's at, when he is the one of like 5 Republicans that confirmed Secretary Mayorkas, who ought to be impeached. He ought to be impeached. I mean, he's beyond incompetent. And this, it's not rocket science, as Brent said. I mean, it's very, very simple. We go back to President Trump's policies, and yeah, Biden doesn't need any new authorization. I mean, in fact, what he did was rescind what was working under President Trump. Namely, let's finish the border wall, let's have the Remain in Mexico policy, and you know what? I'm saying E-Verify. That would get rid of the situation. We'd go ahead and be able to take care of this, and that is something that can be done. I look forward to doing that, working in the U.S. Senate and advancing a true America First agenda.
The reason the border matters is so many different items. But I have a question for you. How many of you are ready to write a check right now for $1,500 to the government to pay for the border crisis? Because that is the share for every single taxpayer in this room, for local, state, and federal government, for what's happening, because the Biden administration and Congress are not doing their job. It's very simple. We need to send the military to the border to close the border and finish building the wall. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it's going to start with Carolyn this time. We'll do 2 minutes on this one.
You're under a speaker. Move a little bit. Get away from the speaker.
All right, what can you do?
Speak loudly.
We'll talk about this one. What can you do as our senator to help protect our liberties regarding digital surveillance, central bank digital currency, digital ID, 15-minute cities, everything with that? So we'll start with Carolyn in 2 minutes.
So much of this comes as a result of the centralization of data. I'm actually working with the state legislature on some things this year regarding not allowing the state to centralize our data. We currently have, we all give it away. I have a son who works for Google. I shouldn't say that, but let me tell you, he does nothing online. He doesn't even do online banking, and he has no social media presence because he understands the amount of data that's being collected. But it is a far different thing when we are turning it over. I still think we shouldn't, and most of us do, than when government requires that it be taken. Do you know, even in our own state, I'll give you an example of being aware of this kind of thing is the only way we're able to fix it. In our own state, when you have medical claims through your insurance company, those claims are being, the information, and including personally identifiable information about you, is being sent to the University of Utah where they sell it. Okay? That's going on in our state right now. So the problem is all of this, once we can centralize this data, once we allow the data to be owned by the entity collecting it with no notification and no ability of us to control the flow and use of that information, then we lose control and there can be absolute ultimate control. I'll tell you, living in Czechoslovakia where the Soviet government had just gotten out, I saw, like I said, the way that the people were crushed, but this would have been a dream for any communist or totalitarian government to be able to have the kind of information that our government and even our businesses right now have access to. We need to disallow it. We need to have a whole lot more opt-ins. We need to have absolute disclosure and agreement by the people when we're giving data. Our driver's license division data in this state is shared with all kinds of entities, and we're talking minor children. And guess who else gets driver's licenses in this state? Illegal aliens. This is being used for voter registration. So all this stuff, we have to have a driver's license. No one's telling us this is happening with that information. We have to shut it down at the federal and state level. I'm done. Okay.
It's a great question. It's a great cause for concern. I mean, it really is. This is something that, unfortunately, the way, I think the answer lies in the Constitution. That is that document that we are supposed to be bound by. And I've said it time and time again, where we have the federal government has started to, or for the past many years, has far exceeded the roles and responsibilities our founders envisioned. I mean, if we just go to Article 1, Section 8, we can see what the federal government, what we the people have given the government the responsibility to do, the federal government. And they are failing miserably at things like immigration because they are doing far too much, far more than what they should be doing. And getting into areas like this with privacy that they're not even abiding by our Bill of Rights. This is a big, big concern. I mean, as in some instances, you've seen it in just the last few years with ESG, where if they can't pass something, they being the left, the progressives, they can't pass something legislatively, they'll try to run it and just go through, and end up going through the another means of doing it. And that's what they're trying to do with ESG, for example, right now, trying to politicize the credit markets and the business markets. And it's something we can't do. I stood up to ESG. I think a big solution with respect to privacy, I've worked with companies in the past that are firm advocates of consumer data privacy. And you have the right, now in many states, that you have the right when you leave and no longer do business with someone, it's your data. And they have to go ahead and forget you. You have a right to be forgotten. So that can be pushed at a federal level as well to unify that across the country. There are many other things I think we can work on to secure that. But with respect to digital currency, I'm not in support of that at all. Why would we want to centralize more power there in the hands of especially a central bank?
The left and the bureaucracy in Washington, D.C. want nothing more than for us to cede power and cede information and give this type of authority to groups that have information about us that can influence our society. And we have got to be more vigilant now than we've ever been to push back on all of these kinds of things that are coming at us from every different direction. And this agenda, many would call it a woke agenda, is trying to infiltrate us through the bureaucracy in Washington, but in a lot of other places as well. We need to make sure that we don't, as a state or as a community or as a country, subscribe to things like what you just saw the legislature finish up this last week. A year ago, when I was Speaker of the House, I started working with Representative Katie Hall to prevent our universities from using diversity, equity, and inclusion for hiring practices. That's the type of thing we shouldn't allow. And now we don't allow that because of the effort that I started last year and they finished this week. And the list of things like this goes on and on and on. And to think about this election, of who we're going to send to Washington, D.C., we have to have a fighter that's going to go back and push back on all of this and represent Utah's conservative values and bring some sanity to the U.S. Senate and get this country back on track.
Okay, who here has a cellular phone? Okay, that's a pretty silly question, right? But at some level, that's where this all starts. And I don't think, if I asked who would be willing to give up their phone, none of you would be willing to do it. We all walk around like this, we're tied to them, it's our whole life. But there are dangers and we're not dealing with them. If you when I was in Washington, if you were the United States Senator, or you were from the president's staff, you often didn't have a phone with you. You maybe had someone else do it. You never did it yourself. Let me tell you why. I had a case as a lawyer. It was a cybersecurity case, and we talked to a cybersecurity expert to be able to understand these kind of things and how much danger we're at. And he took his phone. He took my phone. He said, "Give me your SIM chip." He took it out, put it in another phone. He said, he sent his guy out, way out where we couldn't see him, outside of the building, and then said, "Have your wife call you." My wife called me. I talked to her for a second, and then he waved the guy in, came in. You know what he did? He played me back the conversation. Because it was all done, it was, in this instance, he could do it to show me as an expert because he had my permission. But there are people out there doing those kind of things. It's a frightening thing when you think about it. But to shut everything down isn't the answer either, because you're not willing to go with your phones, and neither am I. It's given us great advances in education and our productivity and everything else. But they know how, the government knows what they have to do, and we need to push for greater privacy for ourselves in all of these matters. Thank you.
As our next senator, how will you determine what the people of Utah want from you?
Well, that's very simple. It's just by listening. This is something I've done for 10 years now, going on 11 years as mayor. I meet with everybody. I have a very strong set of principles that I've laid out on my website that I've been campaigning on for 8 months. But at the end of the day, as your next U.S. Senator, I will be representing the entirety of the state. And what's the best way to be able to do that? Is to get in front of people, ask them questions. We do that in Riverton City every 2 years. We put out a citizen survey. It informs our strategic planning session. We'll constantly be out in front of folks, asking them what it is they want. I've done over 50 town halls now campaigning. I think I have a pretty good pulse on what people are looking for, what their concerns are in Utah. And that's what I plan on working and representing every single day while in the Senate. It's something that I've done again for 10 years. I'll meet with anybody, and that's the type of person that we need. We need somebody who is willing to do just that. This is one of the reasons why I'm in this race. It wasn't just the record of Mitt Romney that I opposed. He came back in 2018, he had a video, he said, "If you elect me as your next senator, I'll fight for you every day. I'll put us on a path to a balanced budget. I'll end illegal immigration," he claimed. "I'll stop federal spending and overreach, and I'll appoint confirm conservative justice to the court." That's still on his website today. That video, I put it in my launch video. It's got over 1 million views. It wasn't just the policy differences. It was the way in which he represented as a state delegate. He doesn't bother to show up to convention. I was asked to chair the Salt Lake County GOP Commission back in March. Was the only one of our federal delegations that didn't produce a video or come in person. I talked with many here. I've got over 100 local elected officials endorse my candidacy. They go back to DC. They can't get his time. That's not right. Utah deserves better representation, and I will give it because that's what I've done for the last 10 years. Thank you.
One of the things that I hear in every corner of this state is frustration about people saying one thing on the campaign trail and getting elected to office and showing up differently. And I think in many ways, that's the cornerstone of Alexis's question. How are you going to reflect the people you've been elected to represent? And there's one thing that I will tell you that I think separates me from a lot of the other candidates, if not all of them. For example, here in Washington County, every member of your legislative delegation, all the members of the House and the Senate, and all 3 county commissioners have endorsed my campaign. And part of the reason why is they know that I listen. I've been in tune with the issues of Washington County. I fought for and created the Colorado River Commission to protect the Colorado River and the water rights of southern Utah. I worked hard to make sure that we got a large appropriation for the biggest water reuse project in the state's history here in Washington County. and the list of things that goes on that I've fought for to protect Washington County. And you get that kind of outcome when you listen to the people you work with and you spend time with the people you represent. And my commitment to you is I'm just going to be the exact same way I've been the last few years I've been in public office when I'm back in Washington, D.C. I'm going to be in tune, I'm going to be in town, and I'm going to be listening to the concerns you have and continuing to fight for the folks of Washington County. Thank you.
You know, one of the great privileges of my life was I grew up with a father who did this. And many of you indicated you knew him and he had done things for you or people you knew. And I learned at a very early age that there's a lot of powerful people, there's a lot of rich people, there's a lot of people that you need to deal with in your life. You know, you need money to run a campaign, for instance. But ultimately, if you want to know what's going on, you get down to regular Utahns. And I tried that. When I worked in the White House, there were, I will assure you, a lot of egos. A lot of people who thought they were pretty important, a lot of people who wanted you to bow down to them. And I took the approach that my father had taught me, and I got to know the people who were doing the work, not the people who were talking. And I went around in every office, whether it was the security offices, whether it was OMB, wherever it was, and I talked to the people who were actually doing the work. And it was an amazing thing because all of a sudden, I was far more connected, I knew more of what was going on, and I could actually get things done. Because you know who gets things done? You know, it's the person working in the office. It's not the guy at the top. The guy at the top's more of a spokesman. And it was one of the great opportunities for me to be able to walk around the entire White House and then the old executive office building and know that wherever I went, I had friends, I knew what was going on, and we did some amazing things in that office. Thank you.
I just have to comment on one thing that Brent said. I have a friend who used to work for his father, who now works for Senator Lee, and he had told me that you could find Senator Hatch at Costco on Saturday, shaking the hands of the women coming in to do their grocery shopping. And I will also say, during the last legislative session, I was in your office begging for larger tax cuts. But we won't talk about that right now. But we did have a downturn. And, you know, I worked with Trent on things as well, as an elected official, when he was elected official. I appreciate that. I think every one of us cares about what the people around us say and think. I will tell you the unifying principle that allows those we elect as leaders is the Constitution. I say all the time, the Constitution was the negotiated middle for the founding of this nation. If we are all standing firmly on the Constitution, we can represent the people who have elected us to office quite well, because there are always places that we can discuss. And when I say compromise, it isn't the way compromise is usually used. We can discuss, we can find common ground, and we can find solutions as long as we are all firmly rooted in the principles of the Constitution that have given us this nation. So that is where I would say, when we are guided by those principles, when we know them, we understand their limits, especially when it comes to federal government, and we're guided by those, it is a lot easier to implement the ideas and actions that we get from the people who have elected us to office, because you can only go so far off track. And the Constitution and its principles will pull you back every single time if you're true to them.
Oh, yeah, Brad. Okay, Brad. Okay.
Thanks.
How are you guys doing? You need a drink? You're doing great. We're gonna keep throwing them at you. So, okay. What is your approach to education? How do you plan to keep the woke ideology out of our children's education?
Education. Well, First and foremost, the last thing we need in this state and in this country is the federal government involved in education in any way, shape, or form. And we talked earlier about the budget, and one of the things you for sure would see me trying to do was getting rid of the Department of Education at a federal level, because speaking of the Constitution, that is not something the federal government has any business being involved in. So first things first, right? But we've already addressed this a little bit. There is an agenda to try to teach our kids things, persuade our kids things. And in fact, even in Washington right now, they want to teach our kids what to think instead of how to think. And we need kids that learn how to think. But you can't do that when you're trying to push all this agenda on them. So we have to just be vigilant. We have to be vigilant and make sure that our libraries and our schools don't have pornography in them. We have to make sure that our educational institutions are not making admissions decisions or hiring decisions based off of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That should not be part of the conversation. And we have to be sure that our schools are managed and led by school boards at a local level that understand all of this. Schools are best led and managed at the local level. But as citizens, we have a responsibility to make sure those school board officials reflect our values and are going to do the kinds of things to drive all of this out of our schools. That's what our job is. So our kids are our future. Nothing matters more. But we have a part to play as well. And the federal government really doesn't, in my opinion, in terms of public education.
You know, we know how to do this. I've been pleased to be able to go to a lot of events with Hillsdale College. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that, but it's really one of the most amazing institutions. And they have a program where they're sending, and it was interesting, I went to one, it was a young Utah couple to start charter schools. They get down to the basics. We have private schools throughout our state here. I actually sent my children to one. I mean, I got kind of sick and tired of their school because they weren't learning anything. And I sent them to somewhere where it was reading, writing, arithmetic, and we got down to the basics. And my kids did incredibly well. They were 2 years behind in the woke school that they were at. And luckily they were young, you can overcome this. And it took my son 4 years to catch up, and eventually got the top grade in mathematics. People know how to do this. We have to get the woke agenda out of the schools. Now, I was lucky, I was selected to be general counsel of a small agency that was really kind of a liberal thing. It wasn't, I shouldn't have gotten involved. Well, I didn't want to get involved in it, but it was Democratic Congress. We couldn't control it. It's called the National Endowment for Humanities. And I was horrified. And I got in there, and they were giving out millions and millions and millions of dollars of grants to left-wing crazy stuff. Well, you know what I did? I realized that a lot of these kind of left-wing crazy people didn't pay their student loans. Does that shock you? No. So you know what I did? I passed a policy for our agency that you could not ask for more government money, millions of dollars in grants, unless you were current on your student loan debt to the government. Now that's the kind of creative solution, because I've been in the private practice and I've been doing things other than just talking about it or being a career politician, finding a way to actually get after. Can I get 10 seconds since I had to deal with it? To actually deal with these problems in a real way. It can be done. We know how, and I think I can add to that equation. Thank you. I have no idea if it works.
I'm a mother of 5 boys. You think I can't scream? But,
Get it up. Okay. Yeah, is it? Is it working?
no, I don't think so.
Okay, is it working? Okay.
All right, so, now what was the question? Oh, it's education. So truly, I've been working with some people trying to get to the bottom of the education funding in the state of Utah. Here's the thing, it comes in, and Brad will know this, it comes in so many different places. We get less than 10% of our education from the federal government, yet they dictate 100% of our curriculum, how our time is spent. I guarantee you, and I've talked to some people in the legislature, and I was told that an analysis at one point was done, and I've not been able to track it down. You must know because you've done a lot in education. And that is, I want to know, and I think my premise would be proven correct, I want to know if the compliance costs of receiving that somewhere between 6 and 9% are greater than the dollar amount that we end up getting. So Howard, you have a job to do. So I want the answer, and I suspect that compliance is more expensive and outweighs the 6 to 9% that we receive. So I wrote an op-ed on the porn in our schools. I was working with some people there was a hearing a month or so ago at the legislature because schools, some of them are completely disregarding the law that was passed last year by Representative Ken Ivory. So I was working with him on some things, wrote an op-ed. The Deseret News refused to publish it. It was published nationally. They'll publish anything I write about taxes, but not about porn in our schools. So we have got to, in fact, I saw a bill, just by the way, that actually says you can't ban at school board meetings the reading of any material that's contained within the schools. Because that's the way that parents don't know and don't understand what's going on, is the kids are exposed to it and the parents are not allowed to be, so they think it's just some crazy right-wingers. We have got to take control of our education and get rid of the Department of Education, and for the time being, stop taking their money.
It's a very important question. It's something I've been advocating for the last 8 months on the campaign trail. Go to trendstacks.com. That's safer families, smaller government, safer families, stronger economy. Safer families. My number one policy prescription is to eliminate the Department of Education. They have $184 billion in this fiscal year. I have state school board members that have endorsed my candidacy. Those numbers cited are within range, 7-8% of our state education budget is reliant on federal dollars, yet they control everything. It's ridiculous. We've got to cut the string, be done with that. Let's move on. I say on my site, parental control isn't everything, or isn't the first priority, is every priority. It's priority A through Z. And nobody understands that better than a mayor and someone who interacts with our local school board weekly. In fact, I was shocked, and this is on my website too, and shows proof that I stood up to all of this wokeness. On my site too, it says we don't need a separation between church and state. We need a separation between woke and state. And sadly, this Biden administration has wholeheartedly endorsed all of these programs, push it down to our military, to education. We can stop it. I stood up against inappropriate materials in school. I was notified by parent organizations. We had over 150 books in our library, where my 14-year-old son goes, and 11-year-old daughter go attend that school district. And they were highly inappropriate. No educational value whatsoever for minors, yet it's there. So I took that on, and we are changing the way in which these materials can be challenged. It was completely ridiculous, the process before. I'm glad to see that Representative Ivory is pushing forward that legislation to kind of clarify and make those changes, but that is why I have great organizations like those that have founded Utah Parents United, Moms for America, and others that have endorsed my campaign. I don't just say I'll do something, I actually do it, and we'll do it at the federal level.
We're gonna do 2 more questions. Ready? Do you support the America First agenda, and would you endorse Donald Trump?
Oh, is it me?
I don't know, I lost track.
Who's first?
Right.
Okay.
Can you give me the first part of that again?
Do you support an America First agenda, and would you endorse Donald Trump?
Yes. tell you a little more about my life. You know, I endorsed President Trump, and I got a call. I deal with a lot of kind of lawyers. Okay, that's all I can say. Lawyers, like, how can you possibly do this? And I said, we have a binary choice here, and it really goes to the heart of whether we're going to survive as a country. And I said, you might be able to come up with some other candidate you might like, but we have a choice. We have a choice between someone who worked hard to get our border secure, kept us energy independent, okay? To me, the number one thing that I will always remember, and it is if this was the only thing he did, I'd support him, is he got us 3 conservative Supreme Court justices who changed the entire court system. I could go down the list. I know he's pretty good about touting himself, and he's got about 15 pages of accomplishment. And in 3 years, our economy's become troubled, our border's wide open, 8 million people coming across it. We have no respect in the international community. We're in 2 wars. How many wars were we going through under Trump?
0.
Okay, and so I look at them and go, the mainstream media likes to really hammer Trump all the time. Spend a little time on Joe Biden. He's an arrogant, narcissist, bad policy guy who's destroying our country. How in the world isn't the choice obvious? It's obvious to me. I hope it's obvious to you. There's one person in our race that hasn't endorsed and will not, and as I understand it, is going to be more of the Romney type. We don't need that. Don't waste this Senate seat, please. That person isn't here, by the way.
Thanks for not bad-mouthing me to my face, Brent. I was actually talking to a previous elected official recently, and I said, I'm friends with, I didn't know Brent before today, but I'm friends with everyone running who's been involved in politics, and he said, the question is, can you be friends with all of them by the end of the race? And I certainly hope that is the case. Because if we are doing this, if we understand that this is about saving our country, not about ego, we can be friends by the end of the race, and we all should be. So, yeah, thanks. So let me just say, yes and yes. I was the only candidate that I'm aware of in this race. This is Brian Schott's favorite. The thing that he ties to my name every time, Brian Schott from the Salt Lake Tribune writes about Carolyn Pippin, and she was marching in Washington, D.C. in December of 2020 in support of Donald Trump. I'm an election denier, and I supported Trump. So yes, it's about time we put America first. I'm going to add, because that kind of sums it up, but I have time still. So I'm going to say something that I didn't get to when it comes to the education thing. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a story, because when I was in Czechoslovakia, and I would ask people, for 40 years, the communists were in that country, and the church was only operating underground, and all of the members there were elderly. And I said, why are nobody's children and grandchildren coming to church? You know why? It's because of the schools. Because at the age of 2 or 3, they were put into the public schools, and they were taught to tell on their parents. So their parents didn't teach them their principles, didn't teach them about God and the things that they valued that could have helped to restore that nation sooner than it did, because the kids were told to tell on them. So when did they tell on them, or when did they tell their children? When they were teenagers. Good luck with trying to give your teenagers something so big as teenagers when they realize that's why you don't live in the best neighborhoods or have the best jobs. So anyway, education, absolutely. Local control, I support an America First agenda and Donald Trump.
Absolutely. I think you've seen in my campaign, it's been built all around America First. And that's why I've received the endorsements of people like Carrie Lake, like Rick Grinnell, like Kash Patel. I've been endorsed by Mark Levin and Charlie Kirk. Yes. I've also been endorsed by Senator Tommy Tuberville. I'm the only one in this race that has the endorsement of a sitting U.S. Senator who's a great America First champion. And we have more coming. I was the first one in this race to endorse publicly President Trump. I did it last summer, in July. I've got an op-ed that I wrote in the Washington Times that clearly articulated the reasons why. And I understand some of the personality differences. It's the policies. As he said, we have a binary choice here. We were doing incredibly well under President Trump. We need to get back to that. I'll be one of his staunchest allies. We can get rid of Mitt Romney, one of his biggest critics right now, replace him with one of his staunchest allies, and be able to move forward in the America First agenda. And those policies, again, the Supreme Court justices, the tax reform of 2017, less than $2 gallon gas. How's that? And in the energy space, yes, I am a firm believer in energy dominance and not in climate alarmism. I'm sorry. But we can definitely get there again. And I think one of the things that really humanized President Trump to me, one of my residents, Josh Holt, was thrown into jail in Venezuela with him and his wife, Tammy, and spent almost 18 months there, languishing. I heard from his mother constantly, Mayor, what can we do? What can we do? It was the strength of President Trump that got a hold of Maduro, brought him home, and we had a huge welcome home party for that kid. That is exactly the type of leadership we had, and we'll have it again under President Trump, and I look forward to working with him and others in the Senate that are all America First.
We've got to fire Joe Biden. We need to support President Trump. That's why I've endorsed him. That's why I support him. This country cannot endure another 4 years of a Biden agenda and administration. The economy can't take it. World security can't take it. Our border can't take it. The list of problems that we're experiencing is just small right now compared to what it will look like in 4 years if we don't all rally around President Trump and help him get elected this year to take back our country. It is so important to all of us. And it's not much more complicated than that, right? We have to do this for the sake of our kids and our grandkids. And the other thing that matters a great deal is we're going to elect one of 2 U.S. senators from Utah to go back to Washington and to work with President Trump. And, you know, to have influence with the White House, to have influence on policy, to have influence on the direction of this country, our next U.S. senators, not just someone has to have the skill set to do that, and hopefully has experience doing that, but also has to have a relationship with President Trump in a way that they can influence and make sure that Utah has a seat at the table. And I commit to you that is who I am. It's why I support him. It's why I voted for him both times he was on the presidential ballot. Not everyone in this race, believe it or not, that's running for the U.S. Senate has voted for President Trump. So we've got a hard decision to make. We need to make sure we make the right decision and send the right person back to Washington, D.C. to work with the White House, to work with President Trump, as we not only take the White House, but Republicans will take back the majority in the Senate this year as well. We've got this amazing opportunity to shape the agenda for this country. But Utah has an important seat at the table, and we need to make sure the U.S. Senate gets more conservative next year. Thank you.
All right, I think we've got time for one more, and then we'll do 3-minute closing statements. So we had a few people asking about the budget deficit. A lot of people say we got to cut spending. So how are you specifically going to influence our budget back there at the federal government?
So my top 3 priorities are the budget, the border, and the overregulation coming out of Washington. They are all tied together. We can do a significant job on the budget if we start pulling back the regulation. When I worked for Senator Lee, we consistently were talking and working on a bill that right now is in the Senate. It will not pass this year, called the REINS Act. And it was brought up earlier, REINS. And what the REINS Act does is it says that any significant federal regulation has to go through the appropriate branch, which is the legislative branch, not the executive branch. We cannot have executive branch agencies creating rules that have the ability to strip us of life, liberty, and property without being put into place by those people we have elected to do that. So I would be happy to go into details, I won't right now, but it has a number of metrics on that say what a significant rule is and would have massive impact on our economy. Right now, the growth that we're seeing in our economy is coming from the public sector, not the private sector. That is a problem, and that is because of the way that the private sector is being squeezed in so many ways, including the overspending coming out of Washington. Regular people cannot afford regular things, cannot afford to put food on the table, cannot afford to buy homes. And we are seeing the impacts of that as they then don't shop in their local businesses as much and they're being squeezed. So we will have, if we can cut the regulatory state, even slightly in this Chevron decision before the Supreme Court is another piece of that. And if we can start cutting that, then we pull back a bunch of the bureaucracy, which pulls back a bunch of the spending. And that bureaucracy is what's driving the increased spending. So that is where I'd start, and there are a whole lot of other places I'd go from there, but that's the beginning.
That is really an excellent question, and we already talked about the Department of Education, save $80 million right there, right? There's a lot of other areas where we can't cut. The regulatory framework is way too extensive. On my side, I talk about taking a chainsaw to it. The RAINS Act is a good way. You know, sadly, Congress abdicated their responsibility to these unelected bureaucrats, right? We all have to live underneath their rules. They produce 100,000 pages of regulation every single year, costs $10,000, $20,000 per employee to come into compliance with. It's a joke. A lot of these agencies can be folded up, gotten rid of. You know, we can just restructure a lot of it. One other thing too, I was back in DC recently and I spoke with Grover Norquist, Americans for Tax Reform. I signed the pledge not to raise taxes. And we got talking about something that we could do, even in the Department of Defense. Did you realize there's over 200,000 people that work at the DoD in a clerical role, that if we remove their jobs, it would have zero impact to national security, right? And so as we were talking about that, I said, well, I know the problem. You're naming it the wrong thing. We got to use the left, the progressives mindset and call this the Northern Virginia Housing Affordability Act. And if we did that, we would be able to pass this through right away and save tons of money. So there are plenty of opportunities. I've done it time and time again as mayor, where I've taken us out of higher layers of government, county services. I've cut our taxes, for example, with our own police department, got out of a county-led police department, created our own, cut our taxes. We saved $15 million the last 5 years since we've done it. We got out of animal control services, several other things. It's counterintuitive. Why is it? And as a business person, I look at this. Usually, you've got, you know, when you have a higher layer of service, it's accretive. You have shared administrative costs. It doesn't work that way. I think because Ronald Reagan said it best, you know, that the closest thing we'll have to eternal life and in this world is a federal bureau. And you've got to be able to cut it.
$8,000 a year, that is how much the cost of living has gone up for an average Utah family since Joe Biden became president. And that increase is because of reckless spending and inflation that was caused in Washington, D.C. And it wasn't just caused by Joe Biden. It was caused by the Democrats in Congress and also go along to get along Republicans that were willing to spend far more money than was coming into the federal government and send that out in many, many reckless ways. And so now we, as the American people and Utah families, are paying the price for that reckless spending. There is no requirement, there is no system that says Congress has to spend the amount of money it's taking in. We need a balanced budget amendment to force hard decisions in Washington, D.C. I've committed to that. I will work towards that and make sure that we finally get things done in Washington in a way that they're done in Utah. I hear over and over again, Brad, when you get to Washington, can you make things there work and look a lot more like Utah, where in fact, in a time when we're the fastest growing state in the country. We had record tax cuts at a time that at least helped Utahns battle this reckless inflation that's been caused by Washington, D.C. This is not rocket science. This is just math. But for some reason, the people we've elected to Washington, D.C. have decided that math doesn't matter, and they're not going to pay attention to it. I know that it does matter, because that $34 trillion in debt that we're leaving to our kids and our grandkids is something we're never going to be forgiven for unless we stop this reckless spending and start to address the real issues in this country. Thank you.
This is an issue I've been hearing my whole life. Haven't we? We got to stop the reckless spending. We're out of control, and it just never ends. And the numbers are just incredible. I mean, I was reading a magazine in December, mid-December, that said that the national debt was, I think they said $29 trillion. And I was like, they were going crazy how out of control that was. And then 3 weeks later, $34 trillion. And I'm like, whoa, when does this stop? But that's the debt. That means what every one of us owe. And it's equal now to the gross domestic product of the United States in a year. In other words, if everybody could be a hermit, not eat, not do anything for a year, maybe we could get to it. Then there's the deficit, and that's the spending. Do you realize of our federal budget, which is already huge, is almost 20% goes to just what they call servicing the debt? Okay? That's interest. That's not getting us roads. That's not funding the military. That's not doing a doggone thing, except for paying interest to who? China, foreign governments, foreign investors. This is a crazy time. So I said at the beginning, I've heard my whole life this. What do we do? Well, I don't disagree with any of the candidates here. But the reality is we have to do two things. One is we need to elect more conservatives, okay? And I've already talked about we can't waste this seat. The second thing is we have to be a lot smarter. I mean, every time the government comes to shut down, you see the national press hammering the conservative candidate and saying, you're going to destroy the entire economy if you don't vote to raise the debt ceiling, right? And I've yet to hear a single Republican go, why don't you ask the Democrats, and if it's going to destroy the economy, why don't they back down and stop spending money they don't have? It's not wrong to say we can't afford it. Really? Right? Thank you. Do you want to go? What order do you want to go in?
Okay. Before that, another candidate, the candidates who are not here, it was brought to my attention that they were mentioned, and we do want to allow for just a 30-second rebuttal before closing remarks.
Okay. Thank you. I got some text messages asking me if maybe John Curtis was not going to support Donald Trump. So I want to tell you, John Curtis, in the last election, campaigned around this country in other states for Donald Trump. He told many Utahns, many moderate Republicans, who were not sure what they wanted to do, what would happen in this country if Joe Biden were elected president. And I'm sorry to say that the results actually have been even worse than John predicted. But if anyone thinks that he's going to stand by and let Joe Biden become president of the United States again without standing up and fighting against that, they are mistaken, or they are telling you something that is not true.
Will he endorse him? Will he endorse him? Will he endorse him?
That is what is going to happen.
No, is he endorsed him yet?
No.
Okay.
He will do that after the primary, when the debate has taken place. He does not like coordination.
Okay, can we have Carolyn start and we'll work our way this way with 3 minutes for closing remarks.
Okay.
So I do, I love a lot of the politicians who I know, but I am going to say, and Brad and I actually get along real well, but I am going to say, Utah is not great because of our politicians. Utah is great because of our belief in God, because of our faith, because of our strong families that are the underpinning of everything that we have. If we had all the same politicians and we sent them to New York or California, we would not look like Utah, not one bit. So the people we elect hopefully are a representative of the people that we are, but that is a moral people with a faith in God and an understanding of the founding of this nation, of the building of this state and what it means. So I will just say that we have got to be aware. I love what has been said. I think Brent said it a couple times, and it's been alluded to by others. We have such an opportunity with this election to send a good, strong, consistent, constitutional conservative who has proven over the years that she understands those principles and has never backed down from them because they are true. And that's what it comes down to. This is truth. This is what allows for the greatest, these principles are what allow for the greatest prosperity of mankind that has ever existed in the history of the world. Prosperity, opportunity, ability to worship as we see fit, and ability to pursue the life that we choose. I am so grateful, and every one of us ought to be, for the opportunity to be born in this country and have the gifts that it offers. And if we don't understand that, we probably don't deserve to be here. So I just want to close by saying, we are where we are as a nation, which I say is teetering on the brink. We've talked about these problems. We can all identify the problems. We are where we are as a nation because we have chosen to reject those things. And we focus not only on the wrong things, but we have elected people who are not there for the right reasons consistently. We have got to do a better job of looking for people who understand these principles and who are looking to serve the people of America. And let me say, politicians love also to say, I know how to get things done. We are $34 trillion in getting things done debt. That is the last thing we need. We need politicians who know how to stand up and do the hard things. Those are the only things before us. They are all hard. So either do the hard things or get out of the way for those who are willing to.
I want to thank the other candidates. You come in, they say you come to a debate and you end up agreeing with everybody. I told Carolyn, I go, gosh, could you appear for me a couple times? It'd be great. We all have small differences, undoubtedly, but we all believe in the need for constitutionality to strengthen families, the reduction of government spending, securing our borders, reducing the debt spending. I spent a big chunk of my life following a man who did these things. And he helped Utahns. And you can hardly go anywhere in this state where he didn't do that. And one of the things I learned is in going to plenty of rubber chicken dinners and political events is you hear a lot of speeches and you hear all these things that you want to hear. And it's kind of red meat to the masses. And it is. But ultimately we need to have, and what I just said in my last answer, people who are smart, who will think through things and find creative ways to do it. Because people have been saying this for years. Some of the older folks here have gone to this lunch probably for years and years and years and hold the same speeches. We have to be smart. In my practice, I'm right now in a case, which is very interesting, where we're trying to shut down a big chunk of the porn industries. Okay, how do you do that? We all talk about how awful it is. I have a client who has Utah inventors who have a patent for streaming technology. Now, the Mormon Church was able to use this for their general conference, but guess who else is using it? The porn industry, because it makes their streaming better. So we're suing them for patent infringement to shut them down. Now, whether that works, I don't know, but that's a pretty creative approach, right? Now, I want you to know who I am, because I am the person who thinks about what we can do, not just say it. I had the privilege, and I've had the privilege for almost 40 years of being one of the founders, not the founders, but one of the directors of the Federalist Society. I don't know if you know that, lawyers know it. When I first started practicing law, judges did whatever they doggone well pleased to do. And we pushed in the schools, in the law schools, in the government to get judges to quit making law and start being judges. Call balls and strikes, not play like a legislature. I've spent my entire legal career doing that. And I, as part of the Federalist Society, later as a private citizen and in several different realms, was integrally involved with picking and helping get, and now they're not all perfect, so don't blame me for everything, 6 conservative justices on the Supreme Court. Name one person running for this race who's done that. And you all know that we fought for years and years and years to get rid of Roe versus Wade. Where is it now? It's gone. We have 6 justices of the Supreme Court that are bringing sanity to government, that are starting to cut down on the regulatory state and get us back to constitutional principles. So I could talk big all day, but I've been there in the trenches and found creative ways for us to win.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Utah is a remarkable place. We are one of the few places left in this country where we actually still believe in personal responsibility. We still believe in a strong family. We want our schools to be strong. We know that small government is the best government, and we know low taxes are the right kinds of taxes. That's the way Utah is. And we have an opportunity to send someone to Washington to reflect those values and fight for our state and change the direction of this country. There's no doubt in my mind that Utah is going to elect a Republican to represent us this year. The question is, and this is a big question, what kind of Republican? And I will just share that I think the kind of Republican we should elect is someone that has done the hard work. Long before Roe versus Wade or the Dobbs decision, here while I was Speaker of the House, we put in place the most favorable pro-life law that you see in the country right now. No state in the country has a pro-life law stronger than Utah's. No state in the country has done more tax cuts year after year after year than Utah over the last 5 years. And by the way, that wasn't easy. People all over the state want to argue against that, tell you why you shouldn't do that. There's all these needs, but we know, I knew that was the right thing to do. And I was relentless in making sure that we created a culture at the state capitol where tax cuts become the norm, not the exception. And you know what? You're going to see another tax cut this year because of the system and the culture that I helped change up there. You know, another thing that changed when I became Speaker, it always drove me nuts that I needed to have a permit to exercise my Second Amendment rights. We got constitutional carry right after I became Speaker of the House because no one in the state of Utah should have to have a permit to issue, to have a permit to be able to exercise their constitutional rights in any way, shape, or form. And I also knew that in no way in Utah should we allow boys to play in girls' sports. And we fixed that and got rid of that. The point being, let's elect someone that has a track record of doing conservative things, So we know what we're gonna get back in Washington DC, and make sure we have someone back there that's going to fight, not just for Utah, but for our country. Thank you.
Well, again, I want to thank the Washington County Republican Women for the invite and for this time to be with all of you. It really, I have people ask me, constantly, Trent, why do you want to do this? I mean, why? And I credit to all the candidates that are running, because you put your life through the ringer. And my family, we're in a fishbowl. And you do it for what? Not a lot of money. You get elected, you have to maintain 2 residences. You're constantly on the go. It was a big decision for me. And ultimately it came down to, some long contemplation with my wife and discussing and saying, look, I grew up in a family of 10 children. I got 7 sisters and 2 brothers. My dad started out as a high school teacher and football coach. We had no money. Any modicum of success that I've attained is because we live in the greatest country on earth. But we're losing that. We're losing it because for far too long, we've elected people that care more about themselves than they do the people they're supposed to represent. Tucker Carlson wrote a book in 2018 called Ship of Fools. We've been led by a ship of fools for far too long, right? They care about themselves. And that has to stop. This ruling elite and managerial class, in their minds, they think they know better than you and I. And they go back to Washington, they enrich themselves through insider trading. They create themselves, become lobbyists, after a certain amount of time. That is enough. That has to stop. We have all the problems today, the 34 trillion debt, this regulatory state run amok, the open borders, everything because they don't care about us. And I made a commitment back in May to run for this seat because I think the choice is very clear. We have the opportunity here to elect either Mitt Romney 2.0, or we can put another Mike Lee in office. If you want another Mike Lee, I'm your guy. I've told that to everybody. I will go back there and work with Senator Lee, Senator Tuberville. I think Kerry Lake will win in Arizona. I already have natural alliances with folks that are true, proven conservatives. I've done it for 10 years in elected office. Again, the only one to challenge Mitt Romney in this race. First to endorse President Trump. No to mask mandates and vaccine mandates of any kind. No to ESG. No to inappropriate materials in school. High density housing. Time and time again, I've said no. I've been willing to stand up to the establishment. That's why I've been endorsed by so many. 100+ local elected officials here. Kerry Lake, Rick Grinnell, Kash Patel, Mark Levin, Charlie Kirk, Senator Tuberville. The list goes on and on. Moms for America, Utah Fraternal Order of Police, several great organizations. I'm also going the caucus convention system only. I'm putting my trust in the delegates. I trust you. Others are gathering signatures in this race. I trust you. I will work with you, and I'll always fight for you.
Thank you so much to all of you guys for coming. We appreciate it. I know Lisa has mentioned this to you guys, but Washington County is a big player, and we are the most conservative county, so we want you to come down to Dixie as often as you can. So thank you so much. We appreciate everyone coming. We have another great candidate forum next month, so watch for some details coming on that. I think if the candidates are willing, I'm sure you can catch them after for a minute. So again, let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you. Let me get the camera. Yes.
How are you? You live here? You live in Winchester Hills, just north of town.
So great. So are you already one of these guys?
No.